Hi everyone, it's Mr. Cash, and welcome to week 3. In this week's video, focusing on some stuff in mathematics, we're starting to look at telling time using an analog clock, not a digital clock. And during week 2, there was a link to this site, Clockworks, and you could play this game where you were practicing telling time to the quarter hour or by 15s. So I wanted to start with that because there were a few questions from students. Some were saying that they weren't sure the site was working right because it never said that it was showing the correct time. So let's have a look at that and see how this would play out. So I'm going to click on play over here and leave it on basic and click start. So the time is starting to count down, and it's asking you to set the time now to 11:45. Okay, so that's down here. That's the digital time. So we want to set the time to 11:45. So you might think, well, okay, so it says 11, and that's the hour hand, so that's the shorter green hand. So let's just set that to the 11. And then it says beside that 45. Well, then that means we'll set the minute hand to 45. And you probably remembered that as you count around here, you can count by 5s when you get to a number. So we're starting at the top, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. Remember that video we were watching, the Schoolhouse Rock video, counting by 5s? That might come in handy now. So it doesn't show that this is the correct time. And the reason for that is that it is not the correct time. This is incorrect. This doesn't show 11:45. In fact, you would never see an analog clock showing this time ever on the clock. And the reason is because this is not the way analog clocks work. So in order to show the correct time, I'd have to move this hour hand just about there before the 12. And it shows that it's correct now. So the question may be, well, why? It says 11:45, and you've got it now, the hour hand pointing closer to the 12. So let's look at that. So this is a website called Toy Theater, and this is Toy Theater /clock. And remember, the link for it will be there on our page. So I'm just going to move this in here. Now, the great thing about this clock is let's make the minutes orange. So now we've got the minute hand is now pointing to the numbers in the orange ring, the orange circle. And the hour hand, which is black, it's pointing to these larger black numbers, which you normally see on a clock. So the great thing about this tool is if you play around with this, you can watch and see how an analog clock works. So what I'd like you to do is, as I'm moving this clock, the minute hand around, I want you to pay attention to this. This is the hour hand. Watch how it moves, okay? Because what we're looking at now is a model of a real analog clock. This is the way actual analog clocks work on the wall. It's a machine. So here we go. So I'm starting to move the minute hand. Now watch that black hour hand. See how I'm moving it around the circle? So now it's halfway around the circle, right? When it points at the 6 exactly, you'll notice now that hour hand is now, right, here's the hour hand, it's actually pointing exactly halfway between the 6 and the 7. Why? The reason is because I moved the minute hand halfway around the big circle. Halfway around the big circle for the minute hand, and now the hour hand is halfway between the 6 and the 7. What do you think is going to happen when I move the minute hand the other half of the way, all the way back around to the 12? Where is this hour hand going to point? Oops. So let's give it a go. So let's move this up. Watch that black hour hand. See how it's getting closer and closer to the 7? And there we are at 7 o'clock. Now, look carefully too. There's a digital readout of the time here in the middle. So you see both the digital time and the analog time. So now I'm going to move it from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Just for fun, I'll make the minutes in blue this time. So here we go. Watch as this black hour hand here it is, that's the hour hand. It's going to move now from exactly pointing at the 7, which is right here. It's going to slowly move in this direction over the hour. It's going to take one whole hour, 60 minutes, to make its way to 8. And what's interesting is you'll notice that the digital time that you see here, that 7, never changes to an 8 until it gets to 8 o'clock. And so that's tricky because at 7:59, like 1 minute to 8 o'clock, it looks like this black hour hand here is pointing at the 8. And it makes it really, really confusing to try and tell the time. So here we go. We're going to move from 7 o'clock, which it is now, to 8 o'clock. Here we go. See how that black hour hand is moving its way around? Coming around to 7:30, 7:35, here we go. I'm going to stop right at 8:59 so that you can see that it is confusing. Sorry, 7:59. There. So there we are at 7:59, okay? And this is what makes analog clocks kind of confusing to read. See how this hour hand? It's pointing right at the 8 now. You would think, well, then that's 8, and this is pointing at, right here, 59. So you'd think that's 8:59, but it's not. This is the trickiest part of reading an analog clock. Until this minute hand right here that I'm shaking, until that minute hand makes it up and hits straight up and down at the o'clock, right at the 12, you'll notice now, finally, that the hour has switched to 8. So another way to think about it is let's go back to 7 o'clock. As it's 7 o'clock and 7:05 and 7:15 and moving around, this is the 7th hour. It's moving through all the minutes in the 7th hour. And it has to move through all the minutes in the 7th hour, even that last minute of the 7th hour. And don't get fooled, even though that is pointing at the 8. It's not 8 something, it's still 7 something. So I want you to take some time, please, and play around with this clock. So you can move this minute hand around. See, as you can see, it moves the hour hand as you go. And by the way, this direction is called clockwise. And if you ever wonder what direction clockwise is, you just have to look up at a clock and look at the numbers that go around. So if you count in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and so forth, that direction that you're counting, that is clockwise. And that's the direction that the hands will always move on a clock. So play around with this clock. You can move the hour hand too, and it makes the minute hand move really fast, because if you're moving from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, it happens really fast when you're pulling the hour hand. So you can make things move really quickly. It's kind of fun. Another thing that you can do, if you think you understand more about how an analog clock works, down here at the bottom there's some buttons. You can turn the digital part off. So here's the digital. That's probably what you're used to. You can turn that digital part off like this by clicking it. And then you could have some fun by setting the time to something. Let's set it here. I'm going to set it to that. Now you can say to yourself, what time is it? Try and figure it out. And when you turn the digital back on, you'll get your answer. So you can kind of quiz yourself. So I always start with the minute hand. So the minute hand is pointing at the 4, but the minute hand always points at sort of that secret number that counts by 5s around the outside that you don't always see on clocks. And if you're not sure what that is, if the clock doesn't have this ring around the outside, you can always start at 12 and go 0, 5, 10, 15, 20. So it's something 20. And now we're going to go over and look at the hour hand. Okay. Now the hour hand is just past the 8 here. See how it's just past the 8? And I know because clockwise is this direction. Let me do that in red. Clockwise goes in this direction. So I know that this hour hand's going to head this way. But it's not at the 9 yet. It's still in the 8th hour. So I would say that the time, it should be 8, and then I put 2 little dots called a colon, 8:20. Okay, let's turn the digital on and see if I'm right. Hey, there we go, 8:20. So then you can try setting it to a different time.